thank you so much for the perfect order.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Thank you. You have fun too, I hope. As I said before, really perfect because I've seen Ebert's talk. He mentioned Strangler Fig pattern and gave a general overview about DDD, about the stuff you can do. And this is something I did last year at a company. And it really is an example how you can do it step by step. I will rush a little bit through this because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. I will give some tips and tricks and learnings we had on the way. I will be here the whole day, so if you have any questions, just come to me later if you don't have time. Also, about me, okay, forget about it, not important. I ran the PHP user group, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm currently looking for new adventures. One thing about the company, Pirate Ship, it's based in Hamburg, the development team, but the product is on the American market. And they like the pirate theme, so you will see a lot of pirate stuff within the presentation. And we start with our treasure map, our agenda. We talk about the boarding stuff, what the initial situation is, then we talk about, okay, how did we plan everything, how did we start it, and I will tell you the tale about what we encountered during this stuff, and at the end, some tips for your journey. So, the initial things we talk about is the crew looking below deck. Actually, the development team is really called below deck because they are working below deck and keeping the engine running. And we are charting our goals and what we want to do, what we want to achieve. The situation was, Richard mentioned also event storming. They did an event storming before I joined the team, and they split up the domains. The teams were already responsible for their domains. The team I joined the domain was rate and buy. As I said before, the product is labels for shipping. American market is very different to European or German market. I learned a lot of stuff I never wanted to learn. I just joined and I really struggled to understand the domains. It was more complex than I ever imagined in the beginning, and it was really hard. I mean, okay, there were some other factors. I had a burnout during COVID, so I really struggled to get into this again, and I was really sometimes challenging myself, is it because I had a break and it's hard to get into, or is the situation, the domain really that complex? Or is the code that complex? Probably everything of that. So let's take a look below deck. Who of you has heard or has done PHP? Okay, who of you hates PHP? Sometimes. PHP has a very rocky history, and some of the stuff that why people hate PHP are valid. Most of them have been valid but are not valid today. This code has all of it. So the good part is they use PHP DI, which is a PHP dependency injection framework, so a lot of stuff was already using that, that's fine. Really a lot of end-to-end tests. I forgot the frameworks for that, but it covered nearly everything. It was really fine. So when you broke anything, it noticed. Not a lot of unit tests, okay? That's the problem. And the structure was really hard to grasp. I'll come to that later because that's really something I struggled, or most people struggle with the most, and talk about architecture, talk about design, you find it in your structure. If you really know a lot of ugly PHP stuff, old ugly PHP stuff, Magento 1, based on Zen Framework 1, that we're talking about early 2010s, and some classes have been without namespaces. To give you some context, PHP introduced namespaces in version 5.3. We're currently on 8.4. 5.3 was released in 2009. So we really had some really, really old legacy stuff in there. And that is a problem. Everybody knew about the problems. It was really, really hard for new people to understand, even for people who've been working there for a couple of years. When I asked them questions, okay, what is this doing? How does this relate to each other? They had a hard time explaining that. So it takes a huge mental load when you get in there and you have to fix something, add a new feature, and you have to have everything in your head, what's responsible for what, where is it, and how it's related, because it's all over the place. And yeah, team domains, as I said, the teams were responsible for domains, but as the code was very all over the place, yeah, you always had problems because you changed something that the other team relied on, and that caused problems, that caused conflicts and everything. So the idea was nice, the idea was and is there, but it was still a work in progress. When we started this, because I got in there, and for me it was, okay, I have an idea, I know how to fix it, how to make this better. I want to do that because it helps me, and it helps the team and the company overall. I wanted to showcase how you can do this. But we had to agree on some rules before we set ahead, because we wanted to avoid a big bang factoring, because as every company has seen it before, there have been refactoring attempts where people struggle to produce something in like 2 months, 3 months, and yet people said, okay, yeah, he wasted time, 3 months, and nothing happened because it never finished. We wanted to avoid that. Also, we wanted to be able to react to more important business problems or tasks, because our team was very much involved with USPS and UPS in the American market. So when they changed something for the price structure, everything, we had to deal with that immediately. So I couldn't say, okay, I'm working on the refactoring for like a couple of weeks. That wasn't possible. We needed to, as Ebert pointed out, needed to bring value all the time. We couldn't wait for the big bang. We also, because we wanted to restructure it and make it easier, we didn't want to do any logical changes. We wanted to make it easier to change stuff later on, to refactor the logic later on. But in order to do that, we needed to group this together, find a way to make it easier to understand. And we wanted to reduce the impact for other teams. When we changed, the rating is a very core logic, because we took the rating as an example, is a very core logic for the buying process and for the rating process. So, as I said before, very small example, the American market is very different. UPS sometimes has daily changing prices for labels for packages. Not like here. So, it matters where you buy your label. I heard stories about people in the US that sold their packages to their family, whatever, on eBay, because eBay had the cheapest shipping rates. Pirate ship is cheaper nowadays. But really, they sell the package on eBay and tell the family, okay, buy it now, and the shipping is cheaper than if I would go to a USPS store. Crazy. At least for me, it was crazy, because I never experienced something like that. That was the situation. So, charting our goals, what were the goals we wanted to achieve? We wanted, in this case, not deliver or have any real user impact for that, because that came after that, but we wanted to reduce the mental load. Faster onboarding, that the rated code is grouped, so when new people come in, understand the code, find the code easier, where they have to look, define domain boundaries. I think Richard talked about bounded context, implement these things into our current code. And improvement for teams, so that we have a clear responsibility, where is my code related, where is our code related for our team, and we can, if we want to go for microservice, for example, then we can go for that. Currently, with a code over the place, that was not possible. If microservices would be a valid option or not is a completely different discussion. Okay. We have the rules in place, we know what the situation. Now let's take a look at what we need to plan, so we can go ahead. I'm not sure if you can see the left picture, it's a little bit hard to read. I marked red some of the places where the rating code is located. It's just an example, and a very small example where the code was located in this whole structure. It was all over the place. And if you've seen, especially PHP project, but in Java as well, a lot of projects have like a technical folder structure or domain structure. You have your controllers, you have your models, you have your enums, you have your folders, like they are named like technical domains. Very hard or very, I wouldn't say that. Hard to understand compared to domain-driven, where you have all in one place. So if, for example, you want to take a look at all the rating stuff, you have to look in the control folder, and the controller folder, in the models folder, database stuff, and other. The code is all over the place with a lot of other stuff mixed in. And in order to understand a new domain, when you come in there and need to change something, you have to have all this in your brain to understand, okay, the controller is there, the model is there, the data object is there, and if I need to change something, has impact all over the place. Very hard, at least for me. Anybody of you encountered something like this before? Oh, the rest is already doing perfect DDD, or? That's nice. If you already do perfect DDD, I think there are other talks as well. Let's do step by step. How do we go from that point? It's very unstructured, everything. What we want to do is identify first. And a simple search, in this case, red, because we have rating, we have rate service. So we have multiple names for the same thing. So we have to take care, okay, where do we find most of the stuff? When you find these central classes, and you know these probably because we have a rate service, we have a rating service, these are the central classes that everybody is using. We can check what other classes are using these. Or you can check for data objects, because they use all over the place with the rate result. You can find out where most of your classes that are related to the rate domain are located. You will not find everything, because as a legacy project, and some of these are named differently. They don't have rate in the name, or just used for some edge case somewhere else, and that's okay. You will not find everything. You need a point to get started in the beginning. And in order to get started, as I said before, we didn't want to have a big bang, so we created a very small task. Each of them should take less than a day, and the code should still work after that. So I can do something, finish it up quickly, and do something else if needed. And, small spoiler, we were finished to like 90–95%, and then there was a break for half a year because other stuff happened. And the last 5%, yeah, would be nice to clean up. As said before from, I think Ibert was it, you don't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect. You achieved a lot of good things already. And to keep everything working is also a very big point. You don't want to break stuff with just refactoring, because that frustrates everybody. You will have an evolving structure. In the beginning, you have an idea in mind, like the bounded context and your domains and subdomains. You have an idea in mind how it might be. What I learned, or what we learned during this journey is, that might change during the journey, because you will understand a lot more about your domain, because you're now talking about and trying to understand your domain much more than before. And with a small task, you're able to react if there's something more important comes up. And that's always nice for business, for your uppers, that you are able to do that and not, okay, wait, I need 2 more weeks to finish my refactoring. Okay, we have a plan. We know what we wanted to achieve. Let's start. The first thing, if you don't have tests in place, you maybe want to have tests for your existing classes. Creating a test harness around that, so you can make sure everything keeps working. We had a lot of end-to-end tests in place, so that was fine. We could use that. Obviously, in cases where we weren't sure, we wrote a new integration test or new unit test for the existing classes, because then we can make sure if it just works. When we have that, when we are sure, okay, we can control and make sure that it keeps working, we copy or move. I will come to that later, because there's a specific reason why you want to do one way or the other, to the new domain module, to the new structure. We're just talking about structure. When talking about architecture, a lot of things you can see, okay, how talk these classes to each other, how are they located in structures. So when I take a look at a structure, I can hopefully understand what kind of architecture is behind that. And grouping them together helps the mental load. As I said before, we had some very old classes, so we added namespaces, cleaned up the class a little bit. Not much. We didn't want to change any logic. We just wanted to improve them a little bit by moving it to the new domain module. If we added namespace, we could add some new missing import, because now we moved one class, but the other classes are still maybe in the old namespace, so we had to change that and fix it up. Also check if some other classes we already moved can now be changed because, or have to be changed because we moved this class. And then we can run the test and check, is everything still okay? One example, the original rating service had no namespace. It was called mel, pp, old PHP syntax, if you had like pseudo namespaces with underscores in between, was mel pp service rating service. No namespace. I don't know if you can see this. Like the constructor syntax that sometimes it was type hinting, sometimes it was not. It was very, very old. And it's still a God class, so it's still not a nice class, but that wasn't our concern, at least for now. When we moved it up, it just called rating service because we had a namespace. We made a consistent constructor syntax, so it's looking better. It's still not a nice class, but it's looking better. And then we are wrapping the new class into the old. We call it like decorator. We talked a lot about, is it really a decorator pattern, or is it a facade, is it a proxy, whatever. I don't care.
Adapter.
Yeah, adapter. It's all similar, but not exactly. It's just an empty shell that forwards or extends the new version, so you can still keep using it with other code that's not really finished. And we marked as deprecated, so we knew where the code is because we wanted to remove it later on. And you don't have to change any other classes. If you ever moved classes in your application, especially in legacy code, and just moved it, you know how many places you have to touch and change because you moved that one class, because the import is different. And I talked about the team boundaries, because these places would all touch other teams. We wanted to avoid that. So, adapter, decorator, whatever you want to call it, we just keep it there, and everything keeps working. We just move the logic into a new class, into a new structure. Very, very easy. I come to it a little bit later as well. These steps are really mind-boring, so you can do a lot of easy mistakes because everything looks the same. The names are the same. The names are very similar. And in modern, we use PHP Storm, but for other languages, IntelliJ, whatever, they try to be very intelligent. Yeah, please double-check everything they try to do. And this is the old class. It's just, yeah, nothing else. Just a comment what we did there, deprecated, marked, and done. So we move the logic into a new place. We can structure all these things, move them together very easily. Does it still work? We have the test. We can check they should still run because they're using decorator that extends the new class. Everything is fine, should be fine. And we can copy and move, if there are unit tests, for example, for the class, we can move them over as well for the new class, so they keep working for the new class as well. And yeah, we run them and check if everything is okay. Very small step, very small impact, but you start moving your code together into a better structure. And that's basically already the strangler fig pattern. You strangle the old code, move it to a new place, and you just leave a shell in the old place. But there's obviously a little bit more to that. But it looks fine. We start moving, you can see it here, we have a rate calculation and rate grouping and a rating module where we have the subdomains already done. The old classes still exist in the old place, all over the place, I don't care. External dependencies still use the old classes, so everything is fine. But it's already grouped. We discovered some subdomains already. That's nice because we knew about these subdomains before, and they changed during the process. We discussed a lot about what do we have. We have rate grouping, we have the rate calculation now, because before when we were talking about rating, we were all talking about rating. And we figured out, are we talking about the domain rating? Are we talking about the rate calculation that is rating? The process of rate something? So it was very hard to even understand when we were talking to each other, what do we mean? So we decided, okay, we rename one rating to rate calculation, so better know what are we talking about. That cleared up a lot of confusion already. And so when you do this, expect a lot of discussions and maybe figuring out your subdomains in a completely new way. Probably because you never cared about that before, because all these classes were in a controller folder, in a data folder, in a model folder. You didn't care about that. It wasn't necessary. But then it is, because you really want to know where to put them. And if you can, maybe you can see it, like the rate calculation has also a model order, and a model folder, and a service, and maybe a controller if it needs to. So you just put the technical folders within your domain folders. You still have the technical folders, but just for this domain or subdomain. Okay. So far, so nice. What we wanted to achieve before was we wanted to create a boundary between the teams. So we can have our code, we know nobody else will touch our code, and that means they should not call our classes directly. We tried with tools and to discover what are our main entry points that other classes, other teams are using. Maybe we need to change them. Maybe we need to move them in a different class or whatever. Different step. But what we wanted to do is create a service API facade. Like, this is our entry point, our gateway. You can use this one. This is open for everybody, but please don't use our internal classes. These are our code, our domain. Don't use them. If you need to use something from our domain, there's like an API you can use with your code and no problem. And they are basically just facade as well. And you can even put you can use the facade for multiple internal classes if you want, but in the first place, we just created facades for the main classes. And kept the signatures of the method, so we don't have to do a lot of changes for the other classes using our code. Make it as easy as possible to change. All these bigger changes, like cleaning up the code, making a better method signature, you can do that after you did these steps. After you put them together, makes it much easier. That was one of the goals. We wanted to make changes easier. In the beginning, don't care about all the nice stuff you think, I could do this. Try to do one thing at a time. Otherwise, you will get into problems. And I'm not sure if you can read this, but it's like you have to have a facade. We have a public function here which just inject our rating service, which is our internal class, and then it just forwards the call to our internal class. Same method, signature, everything. And with that, we can just change all the dependencies from other teams, from other code, went to our internal class, changes to this class, and should still keep working. We can change dependencies from the decorator or adapter, however you want to call it, to the facade. When everything is removed there, modern APIs or modern IDEs tell you if there's no usage anymore. That's pretty fine. But if you're, for example, using a lot of events or other stuff that's magical, you will not always be able to find out, is anybody else still using this class? You can use a decorator to implement some logging, to check if anybody's still using this. So you can be careful, you don't have to throw it away immediately. You can just make sure, okay, we check, we log if anybody else is still using this and change this over time. Your internal classes should still use your own classes. You should not use from your domain, don't use your own API facade, because that, okay, if I want to go there, I have to go out there, back in, that's kind of stupid. So you keep using your own, but everybody else should use your API facade. And if nobody's using your decorator anymore, you can throw it away. You removed your classes and everything is fine. You have a boundary for everybody else, and you have your internal classes that should be only used by your classes, and they're all structured together in one place, so it makes it much easier to understand and find out if you're working on that domain, where is all my code? Where's all my classes? Which stuff belongs together? Okay, we're still doing fine, hopefully. Thanks God for our E2E test. We had a lot of stuff we could check if it's still working. But you can also just create new integration tests for the facade to make sure it keeps working for everybody else. So you have like a contract you can agree on, like an external API just for your other teams. And make sure all the tests are green, and then everybody is happy. Hopefully. Now, we have our rating folder with our subdomains, and we now have a rating facade folder or structure. We discussed a lot if we should put this in one folder or not. We decided we put a different rating facade folder. Also, we had an idea or discussion, if we have multiple domains that do this, or did this in the meantime, do we have like one service facade structure where we put all the facades into? So yeah, up to you. The most important thing is that you have one place where you have all your facades for your domain in one place again. And you can even enforce these with some tools. I will show deptrack later on because I use this to identify stuff. You can also use deptrack, the tool for dependency tracking, obviously, in PHP. Java has similar tools and other languages as well, but I don't know all of them. But now we're enforcing some of these rules within our pipeline, that you cannot call from a different module into your internal model. You have to use these facades if you want to call them. So you can make sure that nobody breaks this idea. Otherwise, you have the same problem again in a couple of years or a month. Okay. I mean, that was really straightforward, very nice. I mean, okay, we can be done, you can go home. Obviously, there are some problems, especially with legacy code. You have these God classes that are really doing a lot of things at once. Don't try to split them up right now. Move that to later, refactor them later when you can do it easily without impacting anybody else. There might be problems with classes that are shared for different teams. You will find classes that are doing stuff for your team, for other teams. Then you can maybe extract the stuff you need into a new class. I would be very careful with this. We did it in a couple of occasions. It's okay if you really can say, okay, this method, maybe if you look at this, we had one class where half of the method was for one domain and half of the other classes were for our domain. We just moved the method into a new class and everything was fine. If you run into a class that's really mixing everything up, then you probably need to think about your domains again, because maybe they are more related than you previously thought. The decorator classes extends the same name. If the old class has already a namespace, for example, if the rating service was already rating service and we moved it to a new place, then rating service extends rating service is bad for the for PHP Storm at least, and it tries to autocomplete and often recommends base in that alt name as an alias for the newer class. As I said before, they try to be very intelligent, and if you just press through and everything is fine, it will do something that's not correct, because everything sounds very similar. You have to take a look at this. Mistakes will happen. That's why you have the test, so you can figure out something is not working. And also mentioned this before, your understanding of the domain will probably change during the process. You will learn a lot more about your domain than you had before, even if you did event storming before, because you're now really trying to figure out where a concrete class belongs to. And then you figure out, okay, wait, this is not really rate calculation. This does something else. Okay, what do we call this? We never talked about this before. So your understanding really grows during the process. I think this is really, really important, because when I started this team, I had no idea the domain. I asked people, okay, how does this work? Can you maybe draw a diagram for me and show me? Nobody could. It was all in the head, and because drawing a diagram if your code is all over the place and you don't have a structure is really, really hard. We started drawing diagrams because figuring out, okay, where does this belong? What belongs together? Oh, maybe this is a duplicate. There was an example from Richard with a book, and from Eberhard, what was his example? I forgot it. Customer. So you have these different things that maybe are duplicate from the name, but maybe you need to split up for different domains. These are all learnings you can expect during this process. Because before, there was just one customer model, because they were all over the place, and you need just customer. For our example, there was shipment. Shipment does everything. Really everything. Whenever you need something, you use shipment. And obviously that does not work in the long run, but we didn't change that during that process, but you figure out these things that are really a problem when you want to change it. And these are the next steps you do, obviously, after the small refactoring. We got another problem, because people noticed when I started doing this, wait, the Git history is gone. If you copy the class to a new place and leave the old in place and change that to a decorator, the old one still has a history, but the new one is a new class. It has no history for Git. And some people, I mean, you can have a lot of discussion how important is the history, but people wanted to see the history of the class, and if I deleted the old one later on, there's no history anymore. So what we did, in the first step, that I said copy or move in the beginning, we moved the old class to the new place. So the history, Git knows the history. I did a local commit, So Git knows, okay, this is the new place for the old class. I restored the old class or just created a new one because it's just an empty shell in the old spot. Then this class has no history anymore, but we still have the history in the new moved class. So you can keep your history while doing this, otherwise you might lose it. And depending on how much you fancy your history and how much you want to keep it, it's a step more to do that, but this is the workaround for this. And as I said before, the decorator or the adapter will probably obviously not have any Git history, but there are even some more ideas how you can do that. I will show that later. The main learnings were it's very easy to mess up your Git history when you do that, if you didn't know that and didn't pay attention to this, because we did it with a couple of submodules. Basically, I started with the easiest, most central classes because they were pretty obvious, and yeah, these are the ones where the history is the most important because a lot of stuff happened there. Some files you can move directly. If it's a very small class where you have low dependencies or very small dependencies, just move it directly. You don't need a decorator class or adapter for every single file. Sometimes you can just move it. You have one or two other files, maybe even internal files, internal classes in your domain. Change them directly, no problem. Double check your commits because it's very easy when you do that for a couple of days and you have rating service, rating result, and you don't know what class you touched when and where, if everything is correct. And I said, IntelliJ, PHP Storm, try to be very intelligent about suggesting new names for stuff. It's very, very easy to mess things up because it's very mind-boring work. That's something to keep in mind. Do not underestimate the need for discussion. As I said before, you learn a lot of things. You need to discuss things in your team, maybe with other teams, and to clarify, because you learn a lot about where are my real boundaries, how is this currently implemented, what maybe do you need to change later. Not everything needs to be fixed right in the beginning. Finding out where's the problem, what you need to change later on is very important, because before that you didn't know. Just being aware of that, I think it's a very important thing. And as I said before, we had like a half-year break because business pressure can lead to delays. So be ready to accept that. And yeah, I was sitting there, I want to finish the last 5%. It's just so close to being finished. Value for the customer is more important than just cleaning up. And some more tips before you do this, coming from the learnings. Talking about the history, IntelliJ, PHP Storm have some very nice features. I don't think they are basic Git features. You can show the history for a class, for example, even if they've been moved. You can show history for a method, even if this method has been moved from a different class to this class. You even can show the history for a couple of lines. As far as I know, this works with your cache and your local cache from your IDE. So if you check everything out for new, some of this might not work. But if you're working with your IDE for a long time, this is very helpful as well. That kind of solved our problem with the history as well. But yeah, as I said, it's local cache, so it can get lost. Talking about dependency tracking, I like tools that give me an idea what I'm dealing with, and so when I get a new code or something, I always want some tools. This is a very small part, just the overall modules of the old legacy application. Who is talking to whom? Yeah. You see why I think it was very helpful that we started grouping stuff together and not having everything all over the place. I mean, we have export, we have reconciliation, okay, there's a helper class, there's shipping, here's rating. Yeah, and everything is all over the place. So it was not really helpful, it was showing, okay, we need to do something. And you can configure deptrack to make it a little bit more condensed and take a look at your things. And I started doing this and checked this after each bigger change to see what changed. Is there anything still talking to my modules that we want to change, that we need to adjust? If you forget something, In the beginning, I said you will not find everything, but when you clean up, more and more you'll find out what is missing. Stuff you missed earlier because it was drowned into a big mess of other rating classes all over the place. But if these are cleaned up, you will see, okay, who else is still talking to my class? As I mentioned before, also in the decorator you can add logging, so if you still have problems finding that, this will show you the classes that are still missing. And yeah, with the facade here, we had a GraphQL API, where we talked a lot about as well, does this belong into our internal domain? Is GraphQL external? So stuff like this, I don't think there's a perfect solution for this. You have to figure it out for your project. But you start talking about these things that you didn't talk about before. PHP metrics and this kind of diagram, again, Java has something like this as well. I think on a SonarQube, it's just showing who is talking to who. You can see it's not really see it from there. There are like red lines and blue lines, who is talking to whom. It just helps to get an overview, okay, did we group it together? Is still something missing or is it still a chaos? It's just nice, for me it was just nice to see the process and the progress of this. When I started changing, it was all over the place, and one after another, it got better. Still not perfect, but it's the first step, and it's much easier to understand it. This was mentioned right before. We had a book club in a company, and we were reading this one at first, working effectively with legacy code. I can partly recommend it. It's very old. Parts of these are very nice. It tells you about how to create test harness for your classes. It was written before unit test frameworks became really popular, so it tells you about how you can write your own unit test framework. So half of the book I would not really recommend nowadays. This one, I think it's out in English now. Right now, we read it in German back then. It's from WPS, from Henning Schwendner and Carola Lilienthal, that I mentioned before as well. And I can really, really recommend it because it's a very good process explaining this as well with more pictures, domain storytelling, what was mentioned by Richard before. So it's a really good book. I can really recommend it. And Henning is also running the DDD user group in Hamburg. So I can recommend that one as well. Some very small last advice before you can lift your anchors. Keep the task small, really small. I said before, like maximum one day, I try to keep it like every small ticket, every small task, like 2 hours. Move something. You have all these steps. Okay, first I'm moving or copying them. This is one task. You can do that, you have something done. You don't have to create the service facade right away. You don't have to clean up the dependencies at the same. These are all simple, small steps you can do one at a time. Decide on your refactoring loop. Do you want to move all classes before creating the facade, or you want to have small steps, like this is my package, and I want to move that before, and then I create an API for that? Depends on how clear your domain is. If you're not really clear what is the outcome of my structure, of my subdomains, maybe it makes sense to move more stuff before you create that. If you're pretty sure you know already your domain, your subdomains, you can move these small packages. Either way, you will probably not be perfect, and that's fine. Also, talk to business, talk to the other teams, talk to your team lead, whatever, to make sure they are all in the same boat. They know what's going on, they know what's happening, so they understand what your goal is and what the benefit is in the long run. Makes it much easier if there's something important coming up that they can decide and value which one is more important. No, come on. Okay, that was all. I rushed a little bit through it because we were starting late. I hope I catched up and did in time. For slides, you can questions, you can email me. I think they will be available from techCamp as well. My LinkedIn profile again, and I'll be here for the rest of the day. So if you have any questions, feel free to come to me. And obviously there are some of the links in there in the presentation as well. You can take a picture or just get the slides later on. Okay.
Thank you very much. Sorry for rushing you.
I hope it was not too fast. I know I can speak a little bit too fast, but it was getting late.
I think it was perfectly fine. I understood you quite well. So Do you have any comments, any questions? Is there something? Yeah, of course. I'm coming downstairs again. Rushing to you. There you go.
Thank you. Awesome talk.
Thank you.
Been through those things a couple of times in my life. I feel the pain.
It can be fun as well.
That's what I wanted to say also. Like nowadays, I actually prefer legacy projects because it's like, you know, the story of happy families and unhappy families. When you write green grass project, everything is clean code, hexagonal architecture, DDD, TDD, and all those things, and it's kind of repeating. But when you go in a mess like this, then you have every legacy system being bad in a different way, right? My question is to you regarding your service facades. I was just wondering, why weren't you using PHP interfaces? These are quite good these days, as a contract between your system components. Is it because of your dependency injection framework, or was there another reason?
Basically, yet because we didn't want to introduce new technology or new ideas. We wanted to keep it as simple as possible in the first place. But yeah, there are multiple. This is just one idea how we did it. There are multiple ways to do that. This, or when you see the high-level talks about how you do it, it's always high-level. And because they do it high-level, because there are multiple ways to do this. And this is just one example how we did it, our experience with this. This does not mean do everything exactly like we did there. But the steps in general stay the same. But if you use an API facade, if you use interfaces, whatever.
Yeah, and can you tell us a bit more, like how big a team was for doing this, or the structure of teams? Like
the teams were split up. When I joined, the teams were just split up, and before it was a bigger team. When I joined, it was then one front end, soon a second front end joined, including me, 2 back end, and 1 full stack who was switching. So it was a very small team, and I did most of the work for this domain, because for me it was very easy and very helpful to get myself into the domain, because it's so big and so complex. I didn't get it, and doing this really helped me to understand more of the domain, because I needed to find out everything, and then I had a discussion. Okay, where does this belong to? And we figured out, the team figured out, we didn't know as much about the domain as we thought, or as they thought. Even the full stack developer was the first developer in the company. He was working there for more than 5 years. Yeah, still there were things we didn't know, because it was just they had nowhere to look, but they didn't know what would be the structure be. What is a subdomain? They just know, okay, if I need to change this, I do it there. They never had to think about this in a structured, in a domain way.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. You have to be very fast. So, Frank.
Yeah.
This is a challenge for you now. Answer in 2 sentences.
Thanks, very good talk, thank you. Not sure if that will be possible to answer in 2 sentences. Have you attempted to refactor God classes?
Yes.
How was it?
You mean me? Try to do it. Do you mean me in general, or during this process?
In general, what is your experience? How do you attempt to do it?
Because obviously during this we didn't do that, because it was an active choice not to do this until after. When you do it, kind of similar what I explained in between, when you have classes that have multiple domains in them. Try to figure out what is the structure, because in God classes we very often have methods that belong to each other. Try to I start with just regrouping maybe within the class to find out, okay, this method uses this method and uses this method, and they're called from there. So I try to find blocks of code that belong together so I can extract it to a new class that's named better and that belongs to each other, that has hopefully no other dependencies to the old one. Most of the time it probably will have, but where you can say, okay, this belongs to a new class. Like you have some pros and you say, okay, instead of calling another method, I call a new class.
Great, thank you.
I try to answer as short as possible.
That was great. Thank you very much. I think you're a speaker later on as well, huh? So we meet on stage tomorrow. Okay. I'm going slowly to the stage, so if any, but it didn't work.
No, just a quick one. Thank you for sharing, first of all. Is there anything, one single thing that maybe you would have done differently?
Yeah, we would probably have started with taking a look at the Git history problems beforehand, because we didn't think about that in the beginning. Other than that, because I've done it before, so it's not really like it's my first time doing that, so I think we broke down pretty good into small steps. I would have hoped that like this break of half a year would not have happened, but that was business pressure, other things, as I said before, small team, a lot of business pressure, so yeah, that was a good part because it proved we can just stop it and do it later. So I can't think of anything really big or major that I would say I would do it completely different. Sorry.
That's a very good answer. So, make a cut now, because you have to have a break, and then at 12 o'clock it's already, the next speaker is waiting. Thank you very much. So one last time, kind of give a hand for Frank. And see you at 12, where we switch topics completely to KI.